a vision for From Strong Communities Come Resilient Families, Strengthening Child Welfare and Early Childhood Collaborations through the Family First Prevention Services Act and beyond. My name is Marlo Nash, and I'm serving as the moderator for today's meeting, working alongside a whole team of people from OPSR and DHS to make today's event happen. To share a little bit about myself, I'm moderating today because I've had the pleasure of facilitating a working group and process that is focused on ensuring Oklahoma meets the distinct developmental needs of young children who are involved in the child welfare system or are at risk of becoming involved. You'll hear more about that work today, as it has resulted in the OKFutures Comprehensive Strategic Plan to improve outcomes for all young children and their families. Many stakeholders helped to create the overall plan. I'm the National Director of Partnerships and Policies for St. Francis Ministries. St. Francis is a national and international organization that rebuilds the well-being of children and families by providing hope and healing through policy and systems change work and through a wide array of services delivered in partnership with public agencies and other community partners in Kansas, Nebraska, Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Iowa, and Mississippi. Our work with families informs our national advocacy, which is the work I lead. In my role, I work at the federal level and with state leaders across many states to focus on pressing needs through consultation and partnership. I'm a native Oklahoman, and I lived there until moving to DC about 16 years ago. When I was in Oklahoma, I worked at the Oklahoma Institute for Child Advocacy and actually helped start the Oklahoma Partnership for School Readiness. And nationally, I've worked with United Way of America to lead Success by Six and to help shape the Family First Prevention Services Act. I'm delighted to be with you today to accomplish our meeting purpose, which is to share information to strengthen collaborations for Oklahoma's young children and their families who face adversity in their communities and homes that can lead to child maltreatment. We hope to accomplish these meeting results with you today. We hope that you'll know about the work that OPSR and DHS are doing together to focus on the distinct needs of young children and their families, and that we do that work through a holistic view of strengthening families and communities. We hope that today's meeting builds awareness about the fact that preventable neglect drives Oklahoma families into the child welfare system at a higher occurrence than child abuse. We hope that you'll see how the Family First Prevention Services Act implementation is actually part of a much broader body of work that Oklahoma stakeholders are undertaking to keep families safely together. And we hope that you become more aware of how this work will move forward in the state and how you can continue to be connected to it. To set the context for today's meeting, I want to introduce the concept of a performance moment to you. A performance moment is a snapshot in time that indicates that much has effectively been at work to achieve the intended results. We see examples of performance moments in popular culture, in our daily lives, and in our work as systems change leaders and advocates. Here's an example of a performance moment that's very common for us. When you place your online order for your specific Starbucks drink, I don't know, like tall, decaf, skinny vanilla latte, extra hot, no whip, or something like that, it's a performance moment that happens at Starbucks when you walk in, you pick up the exact drink that you order, and you walk out. There are baristas who are trained to make recipes that chefs have created. Starbucks has set up systems to get high-quality coffee beans from countries all around the world, a growing system, a purchasing system, a delivery system, and so on. There's a technology system that receives your order and processes your payment. If you let your mind think through it, you will see that there is a vast number of systems involved in this single performance moment of providing you with the specific cup of coffee that you ordered. Now let's turn to a performance moment that's directly relevant to today's meeting. This preschooler is the picture of school readiness, confident, happy, healthy, with her new public school building behind her that presumably holds a team of teachers and other adults who are ready to help her continue to learn. Her family system has been involved in this performance moment. Maybe they had smooth sailing throughout her early years. Maybe they weathered some life storms and came out in good shape on the other side. Perhaps they benefited from social and community supports and systems that kept their protective factors high and effectively addressed any adversities or stressors they faced. There was a health system involved, friends and neighbors, likely early care and education providers, maybe library experiences, housing, employment for her parent or parents, maybe home visiting programs or family mental or behavioral health service or counseling were part of helping her family be there for her. Regardless, there were a number of systems aligned well to make this important and exciting performance moment happen for her. But if there are positive performance moments, then we can acknowledge that there are also negative performance moments or snapshots in time that indicate that there was a breakdown or gap. Here is an example of a negative performance moment, a startling indicator that much has been at work to cause an unintended or unwelcome result. 57% of Oklahoma children who've experienced substantiated maltreatment are age 6 or younger. This statistic underscores why we have devoted this meeting to focusing on the intersection of young children and their families and their involvement or risk of involvement in the child welfare system. Today you will hear about the Pair of Aces tree, which represents the experiences and environments that work against the goal of ensuring that families and their children are healthy, safe, and well. These are the experiences that many systems, family systems, social networks, public agencies, private organizations, policymakers, and others are working to prevent or address. When systems, including family systems, communities, and public and private systems, are aligned and working well together, Oklahoma achieves positive performance moments. When they are misaligned, working in silos, or not working in concert across the continuum of prevention and early intervention, negative performance moments are what happen. Today, you will hear about the importance of thinking about a system of child and family well-being, which actually conceptualizes an integrated, cross-sector, cross-agency approach. It isn't one system. It's a way to describe an entire collection of systems working in alignment. This slide shows the continuum of primary prevention, secondary prevention, tertiary prevention, which is when the child welfare system becomes involved, and then stabilization and permanency. And you will hear more about Oklahoma's work across each of these components of the public health continuum for prevention that is in place. While I'm on this slide, I want to talk for a minute about the Family First Prevention Services Act. The FFPSA fundamentally encourages states to direct federal financing toward keeping families safely together when they've become involved with the child welfare system, and they're working to try to keep children out of foster care, which re-traumatizes children even when it's necessary to use foster care. While foster care must be in place to keep some children safe and to restabilize their lives, foster care should not be the only tool Oklahoma uses to respond to child maltreatment. Family preservation is possible for many families and should be available for every family that demonstrates family strength and resiliency and commitment to heal and remain intact. You see the Family First Prevention Services Act where it falls on the continuum. It's one part of all that it takes to keep families safe and together and stable. I like to describe the federal FFPSA as an energy center, and that there is the energy that it takes to implement the new law in the state. And I know many of you have been involved in that and are interested in that. But it's been interesting because it's also served as an energy center to cause new kinds of conversations. And to be precise, it is part of the reason that this conversation we're having today has happened. Another view of the public health continuum that makes up a system of child and family well-being is this pyramid. You'll hear more about this today and how Oklahoma works at the population level, at the base of the pyramid, to strengthen families, what Oklahoma does today and what's envisioned for the future to provide additional preventive supports to families who are experiencing adversities at that secondary level of the pyramid. And you will learn about Oklahoma's current activities and plans for doing more to strengthen families and heal families and children when they become involved in the child welfare system. The narrative arc for today's meeting is this. There are adversities that cause stress that can lead to young child maltreatment. Young child maltreatment is often preventable. When maltreatment is not prevented, too many young children and their families become involved in the child welfare system. When young children become involved in the child welfare system, their distinct developmental needs are often not addressed by the system. Our collective efforts must become better aligned so the newest and youngest Oklahomans each have a chance to experience positive performance moments. To tell us more about this work, we will soon hear from Secretary Brown, who will talk with us for about 15 minutes and then take your questions for about 15 minutes. After Secretary Brown, we will be joined by Sheena Grayson, who is a peer recovery support specialist with North Care. And then we'll have a panel that is organized around the components of the public health approach that I spoke to about a moment ago. Following the panel presentation, we will look forward to what we hope is a very active Q&A session with you. We'll close today by sharing next steps for this work and your involvement in it. If you have questions at any point in the presentation, any point in today's meeting, we encourage you to go ahead and chat them, and to be sure and chat your email address along with them, because as the announcement was made before the meeting officially began, we will be answering all questions either live today or in written follow-up. In advance of today's meeting, you received an email that had a collection of materials that help support the meeting. You may want to have them handy. We're also going to chat the link now, where you can access those materials on the OPSR website. And if you're following social media, please use the hashtag today, hashtag strong communities, hashtag resilient families, and join us on Twitter and Facebook. It's my pleasure now to introduce and welcome Secretary Justin Brown. Today's meeting directly relates to the work that he leads as Cabinet Secretary for Human Services and Early Childhood Initiatives. Governor Stitt appointed Secretary Brown as the director of DHS about a year ago, then asked him to serve as secretary in March. Prior to joining DHS, Secretary Brown was the Chief Executive Officer of Choice Capital Partners, a company formed in 2008 to own, develop, and operate senior housing communities. Although he's recently stepped away from most nonprofit service to avoid any potential conflicts of interest, he has served many community organizations, including the Children's Hospital Foundation, the YMCA of Greater Oklahoma City, Big Brothers Big Sisters, the Oklahoma City Zoo, and the Alzheimer's Association. He and his wife of 18 years, Kelly, are both originally from Oklahoma City and are blessed with 2 children, Hannah and Ford. Secretary Brown, we're delighted that you are here with us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I know that you're going to share yours and get us started.
I am, thank you. So I appreciate the introduction and all of the context prior to my conversation. There's a lot that aligns between the two conversations here. I also appreciate everybody on the phone. As everybody was jumping in, I see a lot of really friendly faces and people that I've gotten to know over the last year, and it's really just an honor to spend this time with you all, again, intentionally around some of these conversations around hope and prevention and collaboration. So the general way I do this is I'll jump in and share a bunch of slides, and I'll talk way too fast, and because there's so much to share that's happening within the agency and within the human services world across the state. But I did want to start just by sort of telling a story, and I hadn't really thought about doing this until now, and so we'll see how it goes. But that means that I'll really work through my slides in much quicker fashion than I would have otherwise. So I apologize if it feels rushed and maybe not so organized, but I think the story is important. So ultimately, so I've been with the agency here about 11 months, coming up on a year in June. And one of the first experiences that I had within a couple of months of being within the agency was I asked Dr. Shropshire to connect me with a child welfare CPS worker and let me go do a ride along and just go see what it was like in the field. So I connected with an Oklahoma County CPS investigator who is now subsequently a hero of mine. Alicia is really just an incredible person. I mean, the bravery and courage, just walking up to a home where you have no idea what's on the other side of the door, and walking in 25 years old, just, taking on the world was just incredible. And so anyways, it was fall break. And so June to whatever that was, October. So a few months in, and all the kids were home. There were 4 kids, and it was a call on neglect. And so really early on, we could tell, and both of us compared notes afterwards, that it wasn't a situation in which the children were in danger. It was just a situation of, candidly, what we see a lot of places is poverty. And fortunately, I was there. Alicia was great, but I was there because I got to be the babysitter of 4 kids for a couple hours as she did her interviews and had conversations. I was playing with the dog, and they were showing me their video games and all that, and it was just great. I enjoyed it. But so when we left and we had after all the interviews, we got in the car and we drove off, and I said, so tell me what's next. What happens here going forward? And she said, well, we both agree that it's not really a case of imminent danger to the family. So what we'll end up doing is I'll call all of the references, and I'll do my due diligence and make sure that what they said was right. And then in 60 days, 30 days or whatever, we'll send a letter sort of closing the investigation. And I left wanting so much more out of that. I left knowing, one, that the team is overworked. The system is just this massive sort of barrier to letting us engage deeply, because she just had to go to the next one. Like, there's another one. We investigate 81,000 calls of abuse and neglect every year that are called in. And so, but I left wanting more. And so I convened a small multidisciplinary team between that child welfare worker and an AFS worker who does the social safety net, because they didn't have a TANF case or a SNAP case. They weren't accepting any of the social safety net services that the agency provides. A child support worker who, candidly, they didn't know where one another's offices were, because it's just these big organizations. And there was a non-custodial parent of the oldest child. So it's a lot of complexities to it. But what it illustrated to me was that there's a real opportunity for us to all work together and talk with one another in different ways to break down barriers that exist within the system to really serve families in a different way. And so I'm probably going to allude to that family a couple of times in this conversation, because that experience really validated some of the planning that I'd been thinking through, and the strategies that we've been working on as an agency to modernize the way we work. So I thought that was somewhat important for me to share. So I'm going to share my screen and try not to talk too fast here, but that was important to work through at the beginning. So I assume, Marlo, give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Great. All right, there we go. So I'm going to go into presentation mode and see if that works. There we go. All right. So really what I wanted to do is just start with a little bit of narrative on what the agency is. So in the context of being able to think through how to solve problems for families and be preventative in nature, we have to understand all of the tools that are available to us to really intervene with families before they become in crisis. So I'm going to go through really quickly what the agency does from a bigger picture perspective, and I'm going to do this quick because it's important but not the most important. So ultimately, we serve 1 million people in the state of Oklahoma, just over that now, with about 6,000 employees. This list of divisions, we have 7 primary program divisions. I'm going to go through in alphabetical order. We, of course, operate the Adult and Family Services Division, which is what you would consider the social safety net for the state of Oklahoma, or the welfare program. We distributed over $840 million in food stamp benefits in 2019 to 378,000 families in need. Secondly, Adult Protective Services investigated just under 19,000 cases of senior abuse and neglect last year. Most of those, interestingly, are self-neglect, so a different set of circumstances from Child Protective Services. Aging Services does lots of things, but I only provide one number in this, but we provided more than 5 million meals to seniors in need through in-home and congregate services. Child care services, of course, I saw a lot of child care folks on the line. So we licensed and regulated just over 3,000 child care facilities, in-home and facility-based centers across the state last year. Child support services, also important service to our families in need, collected more than $350 million in support. And this was a shocking number to me at operating just under 190,000 open cases as of the end of last year. That's incredible. Child welfare services, of course, also a lot of those friends on the line. We had more than 81,000 cases of reported abuse and neglect to the hotline last year. This number is slightly stale, but about just under 8,000 kids in care in child welfare today. And then the seventh, again in alphabetical order, is developmental disability services. You are probably familiar with our DDS wait list with just over 5,000 people on the wait list for services. It's purely an estate appropriation need here, but families in need for services that the agency can help to facilitate. So that's the agency snapshot as a whole. Upon walking in April of 2019, I tried to come up with this concept for what I wanted the agency to look like. And I really want the agency to be a place of innovation. Innovation, we'll talk about here in a minute, but means a lot of things to a lot of people. But for me, in the context of the Department of Human Services, innovation means we are a self-correcting agency, that in times of challenge or in need, we see our own issues and solve them ourselves. And so it hasn't necessarily been the space that all of our agency has been in over the years. In fact, we currently operate still under the Pinnacle Plan in child welfare, although it does not drive the decisions that we make. We are still in the environment in which we have outside sources helping to craft our system. And we need to be an agency of innovation that embraces issues and concerns and addresses them appropriately. So I created this little equation for what I thought in DHS an innovative agency looked like. The first is really having a customer-centered culture, understanding who we serve and what they need from us. The second was this concept of finding our true north. And if you've been around our agency anytime over the last 11 months, you've probably heard this term ad nauseum. But really it is understanding the things that we do, the mission that we're on, that really drives value for the people that we serve. 3 to 5 primary objectives for each of those 7 program divisions. That if they're doing those right, they know that they're serving their customers directly. Then once we know who we're serving, what we do to serve them, then we can build deep systems and processes that allow us to make sure that the daily activities that we do are actually moving the needle for our end customer. And then the fourth element of this equation is the development of deep and collaborative relationships. And that's what was so really interesting to me about this conversation that you all are having today is I see so many different people and organizations on the call, and the intent is to work together to solve problems. And that really is the only way that we can really change the state and serve our communities is by doing this together. Although we're the state's largest agency with just over 6,000 employees, we serve 1.25 million people, and we can't do it alone. So we have to work together. We have to break down the walls that exist that keep people from serving. And so I was really excited to see this conversation and hopeful that we can continue the effort of barrier busting collectively. And so to me, that's the brief equation that gets us to a space of innovation. So I mentioned the True North. The True North concept really was born in the divisions. So we worked with those 7 primary program divisions to find out what was important to the people that they serve. And so now online on our new website, which is okdhs.org, you can read all of those 7 program divisions' True North goals. And I'm not going to go through all of them because we don't have any time for that. However, after that process was complete with the divisions, our leadership team sat down and said, so they're going to do all this hard work in the program divisions. What are we going to do as a leadership team and really as an agency itself, sort of agency-wide, to help support them and to drive value for those that we serve? So we created the Executive Leadership True North Goals. Ultimately, with the same intent as we have within those divisions, is to motivate the team, to empower the team to know that they can make decisions within the communities, as long as they're operating under the stated goals of the agency and the sort of the culture of the agency, that they can make decisions of their own. Also, number 3 is really important in these times, is provides direction and guidance in making decisions. We are currently in the middle of some pretty dramatic budget issues across the state, of course. It's intuitive when you drive around and see the economic activity that's not happening. that first translates into revenue shortfall for the state, but also translated into budget reductions for all of our agencies. So without that leadership, or without that true north, we really didn't have a litmus test as to whether we're spending the proper dollars in the proper places that truly serve our customers. So the True North allows us to do that, and then candidly allows us to be accountable as an agency to make sure that we're sharing this with the community. And if we're acting in a way that's counter to some of the goals that we've stated, that there's a venue for somebody to say, hey, listen, you're not doing it the way you said you want to do it. And so it's a level of transparency that I think the agency really needs to continue to pursue. So I'm going to spend a few minutes here on the executive leadership True North. I'm keeping my eye on my watch. So like I said, we as a leadership team wanted to identify some areas in which we can drive value for the agency. And some of these I'm going to connect directly back to that family that I talked about at the beginning of the conversation here. And so the first of these 8 executive leadership True North strategies is becoming the largest ever Hope-centered organization. We mentioned already in this meeting the concept of adverse childhood experiences, and seeing from the list of people on the call today, I don't have to explain any of that. But ultimately, I've seen the resilience film half dozen times, and I saw Linda Manal on the phone, so I always have to give a shout out to the Potts Family Foundation and appreciate them for spreading that word. But every time I see it, I'm left saying 2 things. One is that makes total sense to me. We are all a product of the experiences that we've had, whether those are good experiences or bad experiences. And then the second thing I'm thinking is, so what do I do with that? So how do I actually create something or change the spaces in which we live to understand that and move forward? And we believe the science of hope is the way that we move forward. So we've connected deeply with Dr. Shan Hellman, of course, the author of Hope Rising and a leading researcher in the science of hope. And we are becoming the largest ever hope-centered organization. We've been measuring individual and collective hope across our agency. In fact, we just 2 days ago saw the results of our first agency-wide survey on collective hope. So we're excited about building that baseline and moving forward and seeing where not only our agency builds hope for our employees, but also the programs that we operate within the communities, how they build hope in their communities. So I'm gonna run through a lot of these, but ultimately hope is a lot about pathways. There are 3 elements, but the pathway conversation is the one that we can engage with our families. And so this family that I saw earlier in my career here at DHS really did not have the pathways to be successful. And so I think as we see how we can all work together, a lot of that is around the framework of hope and utilizing these massive organizations to develop pathways for families in need. The second is removing systematic barriers that keep people from being successful. They exist everywhere. We hear about them all the time, from transportation barriers to childcare barriers to just they're everywhere. And lots of these barriers have been built up over time, not intentionally. I think there are programs that are certainly well-intended, but they're just thrown on top of another well-intended program. And none of this has really been thought about how it works collectively as a whole to serve the customers. So our intent is to remove those barriers. And just so you know, I can talk about each of these for an hour. So I would love to engage with anybody directly if you have questions or thoughts about how we can do these better, or if there's some clarity that would be helpful for you in your space. The third is specific to the agencies, becoming an elite employer. We have to really embrace our workforce. The agency is just full of incredibly passionate people, and it's amazing at times that they've stuck with us this long. They are here to serve. Their hearts are in the right places, and it's just an honor to serve next to them. But we need to be better employers, not just on things like pay and benefits, but on recognizing their mental and emotional health needs. We have a lot of hard work. I mean, the work that people do here is really incredible and challenging, and we bring our own trauma to the agency as well, because we're all here for a reason. And so we need to be aggressive in working to solve those needs for others. Of course, lots of conversation on work-life balance and cultivating talent, and all those good things as well. The fourth is seemingly somewhat boring, and most people sort of glaze over when I use these terms, but it's really important, and that's becoming the model of efficiency, effectiveness, and transparency. And that is critical because right here is the state capitol, and I need to be in a position where I can walk across that lawn and go talk to the governor and talk to the legislature and say, listen, I know our systems are operated with little or no fraud, waste, or abuse. And now here are 10 programs and 10 ways that we can invest in the state of Oklahoma. So now I need more money to do that. And I can't really do that without knowing that we spend our money extremely well and efficiently. We're getting there. I'm not saying we can't. We're rebuilding our finance team. And so we will be in a position very soon, utilizing technology, surprisingly, to make sure that I can walk across the lawn and say that. The fifth is become a space of innovation. We've talked a little bit about that, but that's, of course, around becoming a self-correcting agency, but also a thought leader and program innovator across the country. We're getting there already, which is exciting. The sixth is it's reintroducing ourselves to the public. The agency offers so many incredible services that a lot of people won't take advantage of those services because of the reputation that the agency has built over the years. Those three letters don't necessarily engender this ray of hope. Sometimes they engender and instill fear in families. So we have to reframe the narrative in the community. 12 months ago, my impression of this agency was purely driven by what I saw on the Channel 9 news, right? It had nothing to do with reality. In fact, for every bad story, there are 1,000 incredible things that happen within these agencies, and we have stunk at telling those stories. And where that's really important is in the context of that family that I talked about earlier this morning, is we took that multidisciplinary team that I brought together and we threw the book at them. I said, listen, I want to set this to set the baseline and see if we did everything we possibly could to serve that family, just that one, what could we do? And we went with them with everything, all of these programs, and they said no to every single one because it was DHS that was offering those programs. And it was heartbreaking for me because I know what we can do for these families, but they just won't take it because it's us. And we have got to reframe that narrative, and we're working hard to do so. The seventh is building a culture of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we've got an incredible opportunity here because we serve more than 1 million people, more than a quarter of the state's population, with the state's largest workforce. And we have the opportunity to set the tone for what's right. And the fact that every single person on the other end of our service, as well as all of our employees, are treated the same, that they are all equal in the eyes of our maker and the eyes of our agency. And we work together to solve problems. So much in the way that we've engaged Dr. Hellman in the Science of Hope, we're also engaging an outside organization to come and sit with us in all of our programs and really look at where we're missing the mark in this space. If there are areas of unintended or intended bias, and how we can address those. So that's a real opportunity for us. And then the last one, which is a lot of the work that you all are doing today, is moving to a space of prevention. We hear all the time that a lot of our issues with the agency, and I mentioned it earlier, just over 80,000 cases of abuse and neglect, and those calls that were made to the Child Abuse Hotline were made, and 90% of those are neglect, not abuse, and 70% of those are related to poverty. So just over 60% of 80,000 cases of abuse and neglect every year that we are reported are related to poverty. So if we can move upstream and solve problems for families before they become in crisis, we have a real opportunity to change not only the way the agency interacts with the public, but absolutely change the entire state. So we're excited about how we're going to do that, and lots of ideas in that space as well. And I'm really hopeful that as we tear down barriers and walls across state agencies and start to build true public-private partnerships, that we can all work together to tear down those barriers and to move upstream to be preventative for families. So that's what I had today. I'm here to answer. I got through it fairly. Ooh, I'm late. I'm sorry. I went as fast as I could, but I appreciate everybody's attention, and I'm happy to answer questions as they arise.
Great, thank you, Secretary Brown. Just to remind folks, submit your questions via the chat function. And if you will, add your email address when you submit questions, so that if we can't respond to your question today, we can be sure to get you an emailed response. And we will respond to all questions by May 29th. They'll be posted on the Oklahoma Partnership for School Readiness website. So So we'll get started with Q&A now. So you mentioned, I think the science of hope is really exciting and something that needs to become more and more widespread. As you think about stakeholders who are working in different ways all over the state, what does the science of hope look like when it is applied?
Wow, that's a great question. So the science of hope is, again, built on Dr. Chan Hellman's research on hope, and it really has 3 elements. So the first element is goal setting. So it's me where I am today, seeing that there's something different and better for me. And hope really is, if you're not familiar, is different than a wish. Hope is, I know that the future can be better than the present, and I can do something about it. Without that second sentence fragment, it's just a wish. So you have to have both of those elements. And so the first element really is goal setting. It's, I know that there's something that I want that's out there. The second is a series of pathways. So it's me understanding that I'm sitting here today, I see what I want, and now I know that there's a path for me to get to that space. And then the third is willpower or agency. And that is, I see what's there and that's what I want. I see how to get there, and now I'm not going to stop. I'm fully committed to getting to that place. So I think the people on this phone or on this Zoom call have a really unique opportunity, whether they're within the agency or outside of the agency in their own communities, is that a lot of us are the pathways. We are the way that families can go from where they are to where they want to be. And it's because of the incredible services that we provide that we really are the pathways that exist. So what's amazing, and I'll end the answer to that question with this. What does it mean for people, this concept of rising hope scores? So I believe that a rising hope score is the antidote for a higher ACE score. And so a child's hope score is based on 36 points. And so if from the Chan's research, an increase in a child's hope score by just 2 points out of 36 results in a full letter grade in school. So our kids are coming to school and to all of our situations with a certain level of trauma, and we have got to build their goal setting capabilities, their pathway, their vision of the path that it takes, and then really build that commitment within them so that they can overcome some of the experiences they've had in their lives. So I think the opportunity here with people on this phone is just incredible because of the services that they provide.
Thank you for that. I see lots of people writing, I think taking notes as you're explaining that. And so I appreciate you digging a little deeper in that. You mentioned a couple of things. One, you talked about reframing the narrative. And before you spoke, I lifted up a concept from the work that's that motivated this convening, the work between the Oklahoma Partnership for School Readiness and your the Child Welfare Services division. To think about the concept of a system of child and family well-being, and the fact that that's not a single system, that actually would be a term that would represent effective integration of systems and alignment. So wonder if you could speak to that idea of creating a system of child and family well-being, and included in that how you envision kind of human services and early childhood initiatives, sort of your purview as secretary, aligning with other systems to get more upstream and to prevent, really to stabilize families, but in doing that, preventing child abuse and neglect.
Yeah, well, we all play our own role in the system, right? So like I mentioned before, we serve more than 1 million people in the state with about 6,200 employees, and we can't do it alone. So we have our own space in which we need to operate. But we also, that space is critical because whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, we are in many places the entry point into some of these interventions. And so we are probably best equipped to understand and what resources are available and where families can be, interventions that can be provided for families. And that is with and so those interventions lie in many cases with the partners on this call and in our communities. So we can't provide every service to every family, nor should we. Our system provides a specific role in the lives of families at risk. And we need to be well informed as a cohesive community here to identify early signs so families never come to us. Contrary to some opinion, we don't want to know families. Like, we want them to never talk to us. And so that means we have to be able to provide interventions ahead of time. And then if they do come into contact with our system in particular, we need to figure out how to efficiently disposition families to the right resources available to them, so that they can get the services that they need. So it really is this sort of organic, living, breathing system that needs to work with every partner in the community that has a passion for caring for kids and families.
Yeah, I sometimes describe the child welfare system in the sort of constellation of systems as the emergency room. I mean, what the family has gotten there, it's an intense effort to restabilize them, and that it's a system that's meeting families at the most difficult moment of their lives. And so the more families that we can keep out of that, obviously, is better. And also, I think it's important for stakeholders in every other system to realize the child welfare system is not really resourced or set up to meet all of those intense needs. It's got to have a constellation of services that are aligned and come together to restabilize those families. And with the work that Oklahoma has done over the last few years, and now with a Family First Prevention Services Act only reinforcing those efforts that the state's already been undertaking to keep families together, there's that opportunity to grow that part of the system, which involves the adult mental health and behavioral health system. And it requires healthcare, it requires all the systems that put in those foundational building blocks for families. And I think, what I shared with you the other day, I think it might be interesting to folks on the call to know that Oklahoma, in this work that we've come together around today, focusing on that intervention of young children and their families and the child welfare system, is actually leading among many other states. There's often not a drill down into connecting young children and child welfare. So the work that OPSR and DHS has done is, I think, really going to become an example for other states. So I wonder if you have any comment about the distinct developmental needs of young children and the difficulty to meet all of those needs when you're also trying to keep them safe, again, at that moment of urgency that the family is experiencing, and how partners can convene and be involved, and how we lift up those young children and make sure all of their needs are met.
Well, certainly, I'm not the expert in the room on some of that conversation. I see lots of people on the call who could certainly work to help educate me in some of those respects, and I appreciate that, because it does take a full partnership. Not one person can do anything or everything, and we all have to work together. We have our own spaces. But where my mind was going on some of that conversation was that we really have to build out a robust understanding of what the needs of kids are and families are. And so I think there's a lot of work to do specifically within our agency to understand. I know we're working very hard on that now, but to understand, when we do come into contact with a family, what does a holistic view of that family look like? How do we understand the urgent needs that they have, whether that is urgent child welfare needs or urgent family needs, right? Like if 63% of 81,000 cases a year are around poverty, a lot of those needs that can be addressed are on the lowest rung of Maslow's hierarchy. And so how do we work within the confines of the agency and the resources that we have to solve those needs first? But then also, how do we as not intending to be experts in mental and emotional health, because that's not our role, but how do we provide an immediate assessment for those on the phone and those in the community to understand what the needs are of the child and family immediately, so that we can intervene much, much quicker than we currently are or have in the past. So I think a lot of this conversation really is building, because the agency has truly transformed, and child welfare has truly transformed over the last 6 or 7 or 8 years. And I'm coming in on the back end of that, so I recognize that I'm a beneficiary of incredibly difficult work that has occurred over the years, and really leadership that is underappreciated. And but now we're here, we're in a pretty good space, but we have a lot of room to go. The agency has transformed, and now we have transformational leadership in across the agency, and a significant amount of institutional knowledge and experience. So we're combining this sort of bold vision for what the future can look like with deep experience in the agency still. I mean, I think we have 4, not only do we have the current transformational leader in Dr. Shropshire in child welfare, but I think we do have the 3 prior child welfare directors also still with the agency. And that depth of knowledge is unbelievable. And we mine that all the time. And those are resources that we have to have. And I would venture to guess there isn't another human services agency that has that level of depth of experience and bold leadership at the same time. So, and that involves breaking down barriers and working together, because with all of that, we have to have our community partners. We have to have insight from national leaders. And so we're building a framework to do that. And we have the right team to really change the face of child welfare going forward.
Well, thank you for that answer. And a moment ago, you were talking about the families and what they're experiencing, which is a great moment to conclude this Q&A and have you introduce Sheena Grayson for us. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time, and I'll hand it back to you to do that.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for that. And my sort of last point on this is all of that stuff I just mentioned is absolutely true. And we need your partnership to be bold here. So please don't consider there to be any barriers between agencies. We're trying to reframe this agency away from the concept of being this sort of black box that you don't know how to access, to one that's transparent and collaborative. And so we need your help. And so as you're having these conversations, be bold, tear down walls, and let's all do it together. So thank you for that. With that, I'm honored, honestly, to introduce Sheena. So I've sort of understood her role and what she's been through, her experiences. And so I'm going to read through this, because I would not do it justice if I tried to remember from my bullet points and the notes that I've made. So I'm going to read through this, but it doesn't. Anyways, I'm going to read this. So in our work to enhance support and services for Oklahoma children and families, one of the most valuable resources we have is the family. So we have to bring the voice of the family into the conversation and the voice of the parent. So that important perspective is represented today and on this call by a mother that has overcome the grip of addiction, the loss of losing her children, and knows the honest work it takes to successfully navigate the child welfare system in the state of Oklahoma. When her life changed for the better, she knew she wanted to help others do the same. It's incredible. After her journey with DHS, she completed her associate's degree in alcohol and drug counseling and became a certified peer recovery support specialist. While raising her 4 beautiful children, she began her career at NorthCare, a great partner, working as Oklahoma's first parent partner. Each day, she uses her experiences and connections to offer hope to others and support to other parents that are currently involved with our child welfare system in Oklahoma County. Her voice today represents her story, but it also represents the story of countless parents that have chosen to share their story and experience with her. So please welcome Sheena Grayson.
Thank you, Secretary Brown, for the warm introduction. As stated, I am Sheena Grayson, and as a parent partner, I have the privilege of supporting and connecting with parents on a daily basis that are at a pivotal point in their lives. Our shared experience with DHS allows me the opportunity to partner with them in their success and future. I'm so honored and grateful to be able to speak with you all today. Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to share and speak on behalf of a multitude of parents needing our collective help and support. I would like to begin by giving you a glimpse into my early years of life. I would like for you to imagine yourself in my shoes. If you are willing, take a few minutes with me to place yourself in my environment and consider what life may be like for many parents and families all across our state. I don't normally go into as much detail of my early life when I tell my story, but today I believe it's necessary to share with you so that you begin to gain an understanding of the circumstances in which many like I have lived. This understanding can lead us to have crucial conversations about avenues of prevention and intervention that we must invest in for our communities. I'm no expert on strategy, policy, or procedure, but I do know that when another person feels heard, understood, and cared for, things start to change. My story is similar to others that you may have heard before. The environment in which I grew up in was filled with violence and substance abuse. For those of you familiar with ACE scores, my score is a 9 on the 10-point scale. So hopefully that helps paint the picture of what my childhood looked like without having to go into the not so pretty details. Before I experimented with substances that eventually led to a full-blown addiction, I found myself 15 and pregnant. It seemed that everyone around me, except my siblings, were using hard drugs and somehow were able to reasonably function, at least from my 15-year-old perspective anyways. You see, this was my normal. There was nothing about my life at that time that seemed unsafe or out of control. I never felt like I was neglected or mistreated at the hands of my mother, even with her ongoing use of illegal substances. When I look back at that time, I see a young, scared, determined, stubborn girl who was trying to figure out life. I was just a child learning from my environment how to raise a child of my own. Although he was a full-blown addict himself, I did have the financial support of my child's father and managed to move out on my own with him when I turned 16 and gave birth to my first son. Life was chaotic, but it was stable. I was fortunate to be provided with resources such as childcare and WIC that helped me graduate high school. By this time, I was pregnant with my second child and found myself struggling with the fact that I had reached the height of my weight gain. As a teenager, out of my own, what did I know? I knew from others in my life that meth helped with losing weight, but what I didn't know is that it was extremely addicting and would eventually turn my world upside down. So when the opportunity arose for me to try meth for the first time, my mind only considered the potential weight loss and nothing about the way that it may affect my parenting or my young children. I had seen other adults in my life use substances and still managed to live a seemingly normal life. So this was my new weight loss plan at the age of 17. It wasn't long before I was using every day and the drug completely consumed every aspect of my life. I want to pause here and take you back to the point in my journey I feel might have been a great opportunity to intervene before my drug use. I was in the hospital after having my first child at the age of 16. And I remember getting pamphlets at the hospital that offered advice on helping me to better understand my child's needs and development, all of which ended up in the hospital bag that I barely read over again. I can't help but wonder what my life would have been like if I had been offered a program like Parent Promise or Safe Care right from the start. That if something like a simple intervention would have prevented me from ever having child welfare involvement in the first place. I hadn't seen a positive example of parenting without substances in my upbringing, so how was I supposed to learn that on my own at such a young age? I don't remember having any other friends that had children at that time either. So it makes me wonder if I would have received support and accountability from other peers through a teen mom group, if I would have been so quick to use meth for weight loss, or if the support and accountability to be able to lose weight and raise a child a healthier way would have been there to change my path. And this reminds me of a mother I work with now that is 19 and has 2 children. She had her first child at 17 and similarly has lived her own life with parents that have used substances. Because of this upbringing, her initial response is that she does not feel using drugs affects her ability to parent as long as she's not around her children while using. It's very difficult for her to grasp valid safety concerns due to this example of parenting being a part of her normal life through the years. Although I stated that I received affordable childcare to complete high school, unfortunately, this mom did not have access to that opportunity and has since struggled to provide a stable life for her children. I think about my story and the story of so many others like me and recognize that we must invest in connecting young parents with support and assistance through prevention services. This may often be the first time they realize there's a different, healthier way to parent without substances or violence, and it will produce more meaningful and beneficial outcomes for their children in the long run. When parents like me do not receive appropriate support or healthy parenting examples from their own families and upbringing, we as a community must step in to help. I believe we are on the right track and have really progressed in providing primary prevention services across our state. Programs like Sooner Start, Parents as Teachers, and Safe Care, just to name a few, are really giving Oklahoma families a fighting chance to learn the necessary steps to take for productive, stable, and safe parenting. But it is not just these programs that support parents. We must also invest in and ensure that parents have access to affordable quality childcare, opportunities to continue their personal education, access to early childhood education centers, and peer support for young parents. Think back to what I asked of you at the beginning and consider what you would have needed to have a different outcome if you walked in my shoes. It's encouraging to know that with my primary prevention, it's encouraging to know that with primary prevention, like I just mentioned, many families can find the support they need to make their families strong and healthy. However, some families will need another level of prevention service that involves DHS. Over the past few years, I've seen our state make great strides investing in strategies and partnerships that strengthen and enhance our secondary prevention services once a family has intersected with DHS. I love seeing the success of partnerships like family-centered services and intensive safety services that give families the opportunity to stay together while learning, growing, and changing for the better. We are seeing a shift as families are being served and supported without court involvement within their own homes and communities. What a beautiful way to show families that we truly want to see them be a successful family unit. An unfortunate reality we must also consider is the need for court involvement when child abuse or neglect has already occurred. These children are not able to safely remain in their homes, which leads to court involvement and out-of-home placement. In these cases, we are tasked with working with families to prevent further incidences of child abuse or neglect. I personally lost custody of my first two children on July 6, 2007, due to a car accident in which my intoxicated boyfriend was driving with me and my children in the car. My son broke his arm, and I was arrested. Not to mention, I was 4 months pregnant with my third child at this time. I spent 2 long years within the DHS system struggling with maintaining sobriety, struggling to be honest, and most importantly, struggling to be vulnerable with those around me. This led to my older 2 children being placed in a guardianship with their paternal grandmother and my youngest son being adopted. My son is now 12, and I have not seen him since he was 2. When I look back on that experience, I remember the intense feelings of being alone, the shame of being a bad mother, and feeling like everyone was against me. I needed someone to sit across from me, truly listen, and understand what I was going through. I needed someone to say, I'm here to walk alongside you as long as it takes, and I want you to be successful. Those needs weren't met for me, and I was just so far gone in my addiction that I didn't perceive any interactions that I experienced to be genuine. I had spurts of being sober over the years, but it wasn't until I completely lost myself as a person and was so disgusted with what my life looked like that I was able to do something different. I was offered a female diversion program for mothers that was an alternative to prison called Remerge. That program was my saving grace. Remerge gave me the ability to create a structured routine for my life and my children's life, while providing the opportunity for me to be around other peers that offered accountability and support. It took me 1.5 years of intensive outpatient services to reach my goals and become a healthy, strong version of myself. I now have full custody of my older 2 children and have added 2 more beautiful blessings to our tribe. Following the closure of my DHS case, I could have let that be the end of my journey, but I'm so proud that it wasn't. I was able to break the cycle of pain and addiction in my family and for my children. Today, I'm so grateful for the Parent Partner Program. and the opportunity to be that person I needed in my child welfare case. For other parents that are going through it now, we can't miss the importance of talking with parents and hearing their voice in these matters. Their experiences and feedback are some of our best indicators of how we can move forward with support for families. After speaking with multiple parents about what they feel would have been most beneficial for them in prevention, they shared with me their thoughts on what type of support they would have liked to receive. One parent stated, "I wish the school system had more resources on getting children assessed for behavior disorders. If my son was tested sooner, then maybe I would have learned skills to better support him before child welfare became involved." I quickly connected with a mother that became court involved with DHS after an unsuccessful FCS case. After many discussions with me and encouragement, she began to realize this was an opportunity for her to learn to live her life sober, while continuing to grow into a woman that she is proud of, and grow into a mother that her children would be proud of. She shared that she wished she had someone during her FCS case that knew what she was going through and could have helped her look at the situation from a different perspective. She believed this kind of peer support and connection earlier in her journey may have prevented her case from becoming court involved in the first place. A father of a baby born with substances in their system stated, "I know I am more than capable of raising my child and have proof that I have been sober for over a year now, considering I'm in drug court. I just wish I was given the opportunity to show that I have the protective capacity to keep my baby safe now that she's outside of the womb, instead of her being placed with strangers." A mother that was suffering as a victim of domestic violence shared that she wished both her and her children were taken to a safe place together so that she could have helped her children heal and her children could have helped her heal while making the necessary changes to remain safe. It takes all of us at all levels of prevention to support families the way they need. It starts with ensuring our primary prevention includes access to affordable and reliable child care, educational programs on child development, education on healthy parenting without substances, access to early childhood education, and peer support. We can continue to enhance our secondary prevention services by strengthening FCS services across the state and continuing to utilize innovative, evidence-based programs like intensive safety services, giving families the opportunity to stay together while receiving the support they need to become healthier and stronger. Having the ability to incorporate peer support in our secondary prevention services could be very beneficial as well in preventing families from having to endure out-of-home placement and becoming court involved. Like I stated before, court involvement is necessary in some unfortunate situations. When we find ourselves at that point, we must collaborate with others with a team mindset because we can't do this alone. I see that parents I work with who receive strong, supportive collaboration among their service providers are more successful. Great examples of this type of support would be the multidisciplinary teams within the Oklahoma County Family Tree and our family treatment courts. Additionally, supporting quality family time is dire for these parents to be successful and hopeful. Incorporating peer support whenever possible to establish genuine connections of understanding and providing hope is a huge asset and motivation for change. By providing high-quality collaboration that offers a well-rounded support system, we are creating a system that aids in preventing child abuse, recidivism, and in turn breaks generational cycles of pain and abuse. I would encourage each of you to look at the work you do as planting seeds. At each level of prevention and work, we may not see the outcomes of the seeds of hope, encouragement, education, or support we spread. Our goal must be to add value to every person we come in contact with and to leave them better off than when we met them. We should desire that every parent knows from our work with them that they are valued, respected, deserve an opportunity at recovery, and can have hope for their future. Thank you for your time.
Sheena, thank you for sharing your story. You did such an incredible job of bringing to life all that has been talked about up to this point in this meeting, and helping people understand that programs really can make a difference in people's lives, that the decisions that are made and aligning systems, all the things that we talked about before you spoke, you just brought to home so well and so powerfully. And I'm so grateful for you that you have decided to share your story in the way that, and I know you do this frequently, and I know that Parents Partners works with you and others to do that. And I just think you've set the stage for our whole conversation today, for this whole project, and the need to focus on helping families stay together. There's so many families like yours who love their children, love their families, want a fresh start, want to, and the pathway to do that. And we just can't overlook that, because there's so many Sheenas out there that need us to succeed. And I see, I just want to check in, just so all the participants know, Sheena's going to come back after you hear the panel and be a part of the Q&A session after you hear from the panel. So we're going to let her have a little moment while we do the panel. But if you've got questions for her, you can go ahead and chat them now. We can pick them back up at the end of the panel. But I also see, before we move on, I just want to check in and see if there's any others of our speakers or co-hosts for the meeting want to make any comment before we move on to the panel. Okay. And thank you again, Sheena. Give me just a moment. I'm going to share my screen to introduce the panel. So our panelists now are going to speak to supporting and strengthening child and family well-being. And as Sheena so beautifully punctuated for us, there are so many more things that we can and need to be doing to help families restabilize before they enter the child welfare system and even get to the point of being at risk of having their children go into foster care, perhaps being adopted. So our panelists are going to talk us through those public health prevention continuum that I showed you at the beginning of the meeting, and bring a little more texture to that conversation, a little more detail about what we know about families who are experiencing the kinds of things Sheena shared with us, and what are some of the things that are already happening in Oklahoma to address those, and what more is planned. You'll know, I'm going to introduce all of the panelists, and then they're going to each go and hand off one to the next, just so we can move quickly through. They're going to each do about a 5-minute presentation, and then we do have ample time for Q&A. So please, again, chat your questions as you have them, and we'll pick them up when we get to the end of that. And remember that you can also ask questions of Sheena in addition to each of the panelists. So you'll hear a theme as I introduce each one of them. Each of our panelists has dedicated their career to improving lives for children and families, with a particular focus on strengthening families and preventing child maltreatment. So first we have Dr. Erin Mayer, who's an associate professor of sociology at OU. She teaches graduate courses on program evaluation and collaborates with agencies like OPSR and DHS on evaluations of child welfare and early childhood programs. Before she came to OU, she worked for Casey Family Programs, a national foundation who does a great deal of work to improve child welfare and child outcomes in the country. Our next speaker is Annette Jacoby, who's the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Commission on Children and Youth. She served in that role for the last 2 years, and 21 years prior to coming to the leadership of OCCY. Annette worked at the Oklahoma State Department of Health as the Director of Family Support and Prevention Services. She's a lawyer by training, and Annette and I have known each other for years and worked together early in both of our careers to help start the Oklahoma Lawyers for Children when she was in a leadership role with the Young Lawyers Division of the Oklahoma Bar Association. Our next speaker is Beth Martin, who has 36 years of experience in public health. Over the last 20 years, she's been in the administration at the Oklahoma State Department of Health, where she's currently the Director of Family Support and Prevention Service. Program areas under Beth's supervision include child guidance, the OKDHS Warm Line, sexual risk avoidance education, the Office of Child Abuse Prevention, including the community-based Child Abuse Prevention Grant, Children First, and Maternal, Infant, and Early Childhood Home Visiting Grant, excuse me. Next, Deborah Anderson, who's the Exec Director of the Oklahoma Partnership for School Readiness and has been since June of 2010. Has over 30 years of professional experience, and she's developed expertise in organizing collaborative efforts at both community and state levels to create positive change for young children and their families. Prior to joining OPSR, Deborah was with the Oklahoma State Department of Health, providing state-level leadership for the Child Guidance Program. She has a master's degree in speech pathology from K-State and extensive experience in providing services to young children and with communication delays with state-level program planning and administration and experience with community coalition building. Our final panelist today will be Dr. Deb Shropshire, who has served as the Director of Oklahoma DHS Child Welfare Services for almost a year now. Dr. Shropshire is an Associate Professor of Pediatrics at the University of Oklahoma College of Medicine. From 2001 to 2015, she was also Medical Director at the former Pauline E. Mayer Children's Shelter and helped develop the Fostering Hope Clinic for Children in Foster Care, reviewed individual cases with child welfare caseworkers, and helped develop policy and caseworker training, and served on the Special Review Committee on Child Abuse and Neglect Death. She's not new to DHS. She has served previously in the roles of Medical Director for the Child Welfare Services Division and Deputy Director of Child Welfare Community Partnerships. Dr. Shropshire is a recipient of multiple local and national awards for her work to prevent child abuse and neglect. With that, with those introductions, I'm going to turn it over now to Erin. And Erin, I know you're going to share your screen, so we'll give you a minute to do that. And thank you for being with us and for kicking us off.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to get started. So this reinforces a lot what was said by Mr. Brown and Ms. Grayson, but I'm going to provide some statistics and information, particularly on why it's so critical to focus on young children. I'm going to make the case that young children who are disproportionately represented within the child welfare system are a particularly important group to focus our skills, attention, strategies, and resources towards for economic as well as other benefits. There are several reasons why investing in young children and the families who nurture them that we can see big payoffs. First, early childhood is a sensitive period of development. Foundational skills for cognitive, emotional, and relational aspects of development are on overdrive. Young children are hypersensitive to their environment. The brain is developing and learning so quickly that what happens or doesn't happen during this time can have lasting impacts. Because early childhood is a highly sensitive period, investments in high-quality, nurturing environments have big payoffs, particularly for children who are more vulnerable. For every dollar invested, society will experience a $13 return, observed across many sectors, not just education, according to a Nobel Prize-winning economist, James Heckman. That's a pretty good investment payoff. These returns come from higher high school graduation rates, post-secondary enrollment, avoidance of teen pregnancies, less need for special education services, and reductions in crime. Child welfare disproportionately serves families with young children, all the way from reports of child maltreatment to foster care to placement and length of services. In Oklahoma, to reinforce something that Marlo said, in 2018, 45% of all confirmed cases of child maltreatment are children 5 and under, even though they make up just 27% of the child population. And this percentage is also higher than the national average. Young children in child welfare experience a host of vulnerabilities occurring as a result of the brain's response to toxic stress, stemming from experiences of abuse and neglect, separation from their primary caregiver, and poverty. So let's talk about poverty and child welfare involvement. And I'm glad to see that Mr. Brown raised that issue front and center, because oftentimes poverty is the elephant in the room. It's ever present, everybody knows it's there, but it's infrequently discussed. Or we acknowledge it, but we sweep it under the rug because it seems too complex or intractable. I need to say, it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, that this relationship between poverty and child welfare involvement does not imply that every person living in poverty abuses or neglects their children. Most do not. And not all child maltreatment occurs in families who are poor. But poverty is a condition that presents enormous parenting challenges that I think most of us can imagine if we haven't experienced it ourselves. The strength of the relationship between poverty and child welfare involvement gets stronger as a family moves further along the child welfare service continuum. For instance, low-income families are 7 times more likely to be reported for neglect. That's about the strength of the relationship between smoking and your likelihood of getting lung cancer. Families in poverty are the subject of 50% of all child welfare investigations nationally, which is Oklahoma, similar at 60%, as Mr. Brown said, and 25% of these investigations are children in deep or extreme poverty. And if you look at one state's caseload of open cases, 50% of the families with open child welfare cases are in deep poverty. That means living half at the level of the federal poverty line. Research has long demonstrated the negative impact of poverty on child development, academic achievement, and health across the lifespan. Most recently, though, brain science has allowed us to visualize and better understand these impacts in a tangible way. This graph demonstrates the difference in gray matter between thousands of children at different income levels over the first 3 years of life. And gray matter is critical to executive functioning, or the skills needed to succeed in life. Thus, many children involved with child welfare have the double whammy of trauma and poverty. The challenge for child welfare systems is there's a lack of specialized knowledge and skill around early childhood development. A national scan of states found that only 3 states have specialized training across their workforce in early childhood. There's a lack of immediate resources for implementing best practices in accordance with principles of child development, such as daily visitation for birth parents when their children are in foster care. Only 1 state in the nation actually mandates this. And there are a lack of interventions specifically for this population. The Family First Prevention Services Act has many good elements that will support the needs of young children who come to the attention of child welfare. A focus on kinship providers, post-reunification supports, in-home services to meet family needs when substance abuse and mental health and parenting skills are in need of support. These are all designed for preventing the need for foster care and ensuring family stability, and that's all movement in the right direction. We need these approaches to be 2- and 3-generational programs, relational whole family programs. And we need to remember that so many young children are cared for by grandparents. We have some examples in the field of promising practices and pockets of excellence. Child Haven in Washington State, which provides therapeutic childcare for children who have experienced trauma, abuse, and neglect. Infant toddler course, Safe Care here in Oklahoma, intensive safety services in Oklahoma. So if we invest, back to that return on investment, the work of several economists have told us that early childhood investments will pay off, and this is especially true for the most vulnerable children. Economic reasons are not the only reasons to invest. How a society supports its youngest and most vulnerable members is also a reflection of its values, success, and prosperity. And with that, 5 minutes just over, I will turn it over to Annette for her presentation. Let me stop my screen sharing.
So, good morning. So, Courtney, are you pulling up my slides? Just want to check in.
No, I am not. Gabrielle, do you have the capability to do that?
Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. So thank you so much for having me today. And I thought what would be useful as we go on for the day is to talk about some terminology so we're all on the same page, and kind of play off a little bit of what Dr. Mayer just went over. So my challenge today was to talk in general, very general terms on trauma and child maltreatment. And I thought it would be helpful for us, can you go to the next slide, Gabrielle, to talk about definitions. So there are basically 4 terms that we see in the literature and in discussions nationally. And I think a lot of times they get used interchangeably, but that shouldn't always be the case. It would be helpful for all of us if we kind of use the terms in the same way. So we thought we would lay out using what we see, the terminology used by Child Trends, SAMHSA, and some of the leading people in the country, lay these terms out so it would be useful for us in our discussion. The 4 terms that we see all the time, I think, are childhood adversity, ACEs, that adverse childhood experiences, trauma, and then toxic stress. So we're going to talk a little bit about how these are different. Gabrielle, am I controlling these or are you? Thank you. So childhood adversity. This is just a broad general term that can refer to acute crisis or chronic crisis. And it really is just kind of the general term we hear. And it includes things like poverty, domestic violence, bullying. And I think that's important because we often hear the term childhood adversity, and really that just could encompass a whole variety of topics. The next slide, Gabrielle. Sorry. ACEs, though, is a very concrete set of examples that are were categories created in the terms coined by Vincent Folletti and Robert Anda and all their colleagues in the seminal ACEs study. And really, to be clear, that study occurred so long ago that I think a lot of us, and you see a lot of work in other states and in other efforts to include things like chronic poverty and other issues that have come up over and over again that we know really are barriers to children being able to thrive in their families and in their communities. So in essence, those categories that were included, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, witnessing a mother being treated violently, someone with a mental illness in the household, and then being separated from a parent either through incarceration, death, or divorce. So as you can see there, when they did this very important study with ACEs, they didn't talk about neighborhood violence. They didn't talk about economic issues the way we would want to right now, or maybe even school structures and availability of services such as early childhood or access to quality early childhood. So those may be barriers, maybe depending on the magnitude of the issue, it would be an adverse childhood experience. But all that to say is when folks talk about ACEs, it doesn't mean an ACE is this big, broad topic. It is truly this limited list. Now, other things could be included just in talking about adversity. So let's go on to the use of the word trauma. So trauma is really based on the perception of the person that is seeing something, experience something, being in the middle of something. So it is when a person feels either emotionally, physically, or perhaps both at the same time threatened and feels like they can't protect themselves or move forward. So examples would include psychological threats, physical or sexual, and also community and school violence. But things that we have talked about even in our trauma-informed care task force are, and they relate very well to Oklahoma, are things like natural disasters, terrorism, family members being deployed through the military, and just those kinds of struggles. So we can't forget about these other hosts of activities that might be more acute, and maybe we know that there's a window when those things are going to occur, and hopefully there will be an end to it. But they can cause trauma and lifelong kinds of trauma. So that is a very kind of a different term, and they can all get wrapped up together, but that is a different use than adversity or even ACEs. And then the next slide, Gabrielle, toxic stress. Toxic stress is really trauma that has no end. It is living in a space with issues that you cannot seemingly get resolved. And if it is something that you just feel paralyzed, if you live in a neighborhood and you cannot figure, and it is violent, and you can't figure out how to move out of that neighborhood due to lack of resources financially, then that can cause chronic stress. If you have a health issue that is something you're going to have to manage and deal with that causes you to not be able to be employed, then that can lead to toxic stress. So those are terms that I think are important for the groundwork as we move forward in talking. Next slide, Gabrielle. So the connection. So I think when you read the literature and we talk throughout our dialogues in this work, we need to remember that it's critical that to understand that childhood adversity, and this includes ACEs, it can cause trauma and it can cause toxic stress. But they are not one, all of these terms are not one and the same. And in fact, I think it's really important for us to think about these terms in relationship to the pandemic right now. We are going to see families, I'm sure we're seeing families right now, who have not experienced poverty or severe poverty, or kind of the challenges that they may be facing right now, never thought they'd be in this place, and that they will need services, and they will need to be provided support in a way that we may not have an instant program or a little box to fit them in. So often I think that when we're trying to design a system, and I've been guilty of this myself, we want to create a beautiful system, and everyone needs to fit beautifully into those spaces and those boxes. It's an instance we want to program people out of their situation, when some people just simply need one kind of help. They may need a financial assistance, and then you won't see them again, or they need a connection to a particular service, and then that keeps other dominoes from falling in that kind of a play activity. So I think it's important for us to realize that a cookie cutter approach doesn't work, and that someone facing an acute type of trauma may need very short intervention, and then it may be okay. People facing toxic stress may need more long-term kinds of supports. So all that to say is those terms are important, and I think that it makes sense for us to think about those as we move forward. Then the next slide, Gabrielle. And this is something that I think is something just to consider. And this notion of poverty crossing all those terms, being involved in a lot, but not all, of those situations. And just as stated before, being poor does not mean you're traumatized. Being poor does not necessarily mean that you can't parent well. We see people in poverty parent well all the time. What we do see sometimes is the challenges are super, super great, and they need extra supports. So I thought I'd throw out these figures from the National Kids Count, because unfortunately Oklahoma has very high levels of poverty. So just thinking about the basic 100% or below the federal poverty level, we have 1 out of every 4 kids lives at that level. And even more extreme, we have 1 out of 10 living at 50% or below the federal poverty level, which is just kind of unimaginable. And then 30% of Oklahomans children live in families that have low incomes, and their parents are working. And to me, that's something that we really need to talk more about in the state of Oklahoma, because while until the pandemic we had very low unemployment rates, But unfortunately, where we see a lot of people employed are in low-paying jobs. So we see families with 1, 2, 3 jobs, or not getting enough hours to really cover what they need to for their families, or not getting benefits. So while people may be employed, they may be what we call underemployed, or they may not be bringing in enough income to support their entire family. And that to me is a significant challenge. Next slide, Gabrielle. This is, I think, what we all want to focus on probably for the rest of the day. And this is, I think, the way we're all now beginning to really see adverse childhood experiences and the connection between these community kind of situations, whether in societal situations, impacting adverse childhood experiences and how people behave in their environments. So if a family is poor, if they have, if there are discrimination issues, whether it's race, ethnicity, or LGBTQ issues, there's a whole host of issues that could come up with discrimination, some kind of community disruption, just the lack of being able to move up in the socioeconomic ladder, or poor housing, and I'm going to throw in there even quality of school systems and violence. Those things really impact people and their ability to feel like their family can thrive. So in the best of circumstances, if a lot of folks were just uprooted from a really lovely environment and plopped down into a neighborhood or a community where they had these struggles, we would all find ourselves challenged in trying to figure out how to keep our family moving forward and our kids safe and thriving. So this pair of ACEs tree that we like to talk about now, I really do think rounds out in a more thoughtful way what we see with ACEs. And last but not least, I think this is really a great way to tie up what Secretary Brown and Dr. Mayer were talking about, and that's this whole notion of balancing adverse childhood experiences with hope. And I love this logic model that came out in 2017, and it really has a lot of powerful people that created this document, and the citations there on the bottom. But Dr. Bob Segi, Jeff Linkenbach, Jennifer Jones, Bart Klinkett, there's a lot of really heavy-hitting names that came up with this document. And I think the beautiful thing about this logic model is it allows you to think about frames that we've all been using and talking about, but melding them together to find a path forward. And so on the left, what you'll see is the work by Prevent Child Abuse America in talking about truly our norms. How are we behaving in community through culture, policy, resources, and the environment? And PCA has really led the charge on how to really change our cultural norms and to make them healthier. And then parent and family, again, great work by both the CDC and Prevent Child Abuse America, and the technical packages in particular that the CDC has put out there. And then I think that we can't ignore all the wonderful brain development work, particularly by Jack Schoenkoff, the Center for the Developing Child at Harvard, and how important that has been and shaped our knowledge about just kind of what Dr. Mayer was talking about earlier, why it's so critical to invest in very, very young children. And then when you move on through this logic model, utilizing the data from the National Survey of Children's Health allows us to figure out how things are moving forward, if we are seeing progress. And last but not least, this idea of really the hope science, and how do we really move in the direction so that we have strategies connected with just exactly what Secretary Brown talked about, not a wish, but how is it that we put the legs underneath these ideas so that people can clearly see that there is a path. Goal setting is wonderful, but they have to have the resources to actually move along and be able to achieve those goals. And I think that is truly the implementation and execution of hope science. So with that, I hope that kind of tied up a lot of what we talked about this morning. If you have any questions, there's my contact information. Thanks.
Now we'll move to Beth. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Can I share screens? There we go. So I'm Beth Martin, and I am the director of the Family Support and Prevention Service at the Oklahoma State Department of Health. Currently, family support and prevention is a combination of the Child Guidance Service and the services that had fallen previously under family support and prevention. When we combine those two service areas, it seems to make sense to keep that name because it describes everything we do. And I have spent my career in prevention, starting as a clinician in a rural county health department. And I can tell you that it makes perfect sense that the primary prevention piece of this effort is in the state health department and the county health department level, because we are all about prevention, universal access, population-based services. And I just want to say thank you to Sheena. I wish too that you had been able to access some of the services that we now have available. Access is still a consideration that we work on every day, is how to allow access to the most people for these prevention services. I don't think I have control. Can somebody advance my slide? Let's see. Okay. Just to give a little bit of the background, the Office of Child Abuse Prevention, where we typically house a lot of our prevention work. However, the whole service area is involved in prevention. The office was created out of legislation, and I have given the state statute here if you're interested in what all is entailed in that. Primary prevention are programs and services designed to promote the general welfare of children and families. And I kind of want to add in here too, relationships. I've had staff and friends drill into me over the past many years that it's all about relationships. And I agree with that. It's about the relationship of the parent and the child. It's about the relationship of other caregivers and the child and the families. And it's about the relationship of the community with the families. And primary prevention exists in that realm. The Office of Child Abuse Prevention is required to present and develop a comprehensive plan for the prevention of child abuse. And we're also required by statute to provide reports annually to the governor, the Senate, President Pro Tem of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House. And you cannot talk about prevention without giving it some kind of a framework. There are many different frameworks. We utilize the protective factors framework, and the specifics of that. Can somebody advance my slide? Thank you. And the specifics, the one that we utilize is the Center for the Study of Social Policy developed Strengthening Families Protective Factor Framework. And so that consists of 5 areas: parental resilience, social connections, knowledge of parenting and child development, concrete supports in times of need, and social emotional competence of children. I just want to say that everything that comes from my office is vetted through this framework and must fall into one of these areas because the research has shown that this is where we can make the biggest difference. If you can advance to the next slide, please. This is one of my favorite graphics. It comes from the Center for the Study of Social Policy, and it's a way for each of those kind of nebulous areas to be able to be described in concrete ways that you can understand how families may or how you can access these different and utilize these different protective factors. For example, parental resilience. We want to provide things that help parents understand how to buffer their children from stressful events, and to support parents as they find themselves, making decisions regarding their children. We also want to give them the knowledge base that they need in order to make good decisions for their families. Social connections. We want to help families connect with other families, help them connect with providers if they have that need. The knowledge of parenting and child development. We have a whole network of ways that families are able to access that information, and I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. Concrete supports in times of needs. This is sometimes hard for a state agency to grasp. We work very diligently with our partners regarding providing those concrete supports, finding referrals, and we do provide some of those kinds of supports through our home visiting programs, but we collaborate a lot. It's all about relationships in that area. And then the social emotional competence of children. We do a lot of work in infant mental health, trying to make sure that is something that is always in the forefront of service provision, that we are looking at how the child's emotional competence is developing, as well as their physical development. Can you change slides, please? This does not encompass everything that is being done in Oklahoma, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about, in general, how we do and how we provide primary prevention services. Kind of the cornerstone of that is the home visiting program. Oklahoma was the first state to go statewide with a home visiting program, the Nurse Family Partnership. And in Oklahoma, we refer to that as Children First. Annette Jacoby, who you just heard, was the person that implemented that in Oklahoma and made sure that our county health departments had access to this resource. We still provide Children First through our county health departments, and it is a statewide program. We also, through the Office of Child Abuse Prevention, have grants, contracts with providers across the state to provide parents as teachers. Parents as Teachers is also a home visiting program, and it fits on the continuum of service. Children First has requirements for mothers to enroll in that program prior to their 29th week gestation, and we have registered nurses who go out to those families until the child turns 2. Parents as Teachers is the wraparound service for that. In our model, that people who don't qualify or they don't come to our attention early enough to enroll in Nurse Family Partnership, or for some reason they don't want to enroll in that model, we offer Parents as Teachers, which is has a broader enrollment criteria prenatally up until the child graduates from kindergarten. And so we have parent educators, we contract for those services, and we have that program across the state. We utilize our child abuse prevention funds, and we also utilize some federal grant money for both of those programs. We also have a small contract for Safe Care. This is more of a secondary prevention strategy, but through our maternal infant early childhood home visiting grant, we're able to support safe care in some areas of the state. Also, other things that I'm aware of that are going on, Tulsa has a universal home visiting program through their BEST program, and they work with Hillcrest Hospital. That is always of interest. Every birthing mother at Hillcrest is offered home visiting. And I think that is an excellent model and something that we should pay more attention to. Also, Early Head Start has a home visiting component. And so I don't want to leave that out of the discussion. We have tribal partners that also provide home visiting programs. Typically, they use one of these models, but there are other avenues that home visiting can be accessed. Also through the state health department, our clinic or site-based services. This is where child guidance falls. We do follow the protective factor framework. We do a lot of parent education through our child development specialists, as well as behavioral health specialists. And we have speech language pathologists. We are beginning to acquire some social workers also in this model. And so those are accessible through the county health department. And I'll talk a little bit more in a minute about the services they may provide. Something that we're starting that's new is a pilot in collaboration with Department of Human Services. And that is regarding family resource centers. And we are working on an RFP to pilot 2 family resource centers in the state, and then looking at how we might expand that. And then, of course, you can't, you have to include high quality childcare as a primary prevention strategy. And we work closely with that. Evidence-based models I've listed here, we provide those through the Child Guidance Program, with the exception of the period of purple crying, and that's done through the maternal child health portion of the state health department. Thank you for allowing me to share some of these ideas. Primary prevention is my love. You have a relationship every day with people in your environment, and you should be looking for those kids that you can have a positive effect on. Thank you.
Deborah, I'm not hearing you. I'm not sure if it's true for others.
Apologies, I forgot I had to double unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. So glad to see everybody here today, and we appreciate your patience with us as we work through our technical skills in this new virtual format. I'm happy to be with all of you today, and I appreciate you being here. I want to start with giving you a snapshot of Oklahoma's recent opportunity to reimagine early childhood for all children, and then also to share recommendations to support young children and their families who are involved in or at risk of involvement with the child welfare system. Next slide. A federal preschool development grant provided Oklahoma an unprecedented opportunity to craft a comprehensive plan that aligns services toward a shared vision and goals. Sometimes work on aligning across programs can feel like an unnatural act between non-consenting adults. It's really hard work. Sometimes things go a lot more slower when we work to focus on alignment. But I want us to all keep in mind that families will not thrive, even in the most high quality programs, if they're operating in a fragmented system. And so alignment must happen in order to achieve family well-being. Next. Over the past year, nearly 400 Oklahomans shared their concerns, hopes, and dreams for young children. An ad hoc work group was created in July of 2019 to align the OKFutures Strategic Plan with the Families First Prevention Services Act. Next. An assessment of need in early care and education, health, and family support services revealed that Oklahoma's capacity is strong for public school pre-K, but there are significant gaps in services for children from birth to 3. Many families are unable to afford child care or health insurance, yet they're also not eligible for assistance. Significant disparities exist in health outcomes as well throughout our state. Next, our research confirmed what everyone here knows today, and that is that family support services need more funding. In planning sessions, community leaders and parents and caregivers consistently reported to us that from their perspective, that services are not well coordinated, and that places additional burden on family members. Next. This slide represents the goals and pillars of the OKFutures Strategic Plan. The goals are focused on benefits for the population of children and their families, and the pillars represent the infrastructure that's necessary to strengthen the early childhood system. We spent a good deal of time talking about this picture, but we felt that in the end we were able to provide a picture of the complex nature of the interconnected parts that are necessary for a strong early childhood system. The plan represents a continuum of services from prevention to treatment and from universal to targeted. You can review details of this plan with the link that we provided to you during this meeting. Next. It's important to think about the difference between access and participation. So offering programs without regard to access barriers for children and families experiencing multiple adversities is a result of a misaligned system. It's important to consider the difference between these two and bust the myth that universal access does not mean universal participation. Universal services are available for all at no cost, and typically without regard to income. In Oklahoma, public school pre-K programs are universal, whereas programs such as Head Start, Early Head Start, Sooner Start, home-based parenting programs, nutrition and housing programs are targeted for those meeting eligibility criteria and offered at no charge. Child care, health, and mental health services are available to all for the most part. Sometimes there's difficulty accessing, but it's still available at a cost. Some families receive assistance with receiving those services. Is that confusing? Yes. Only about 74% of our 4-year-olds participate in universal pre-K. So the numbers participating drop significantly for other programs. And many children, as we've talked about earlier, experiencing multiple adversities enter kindergarten with no prior early learning experiences. Okay, next slide. Beth spoke of primary prevention services, and Dr. Shropshire will discuss the tertiary prevention services that build out the public health model. My focus today will be on the secondary prevention services, and we'll consider these in the context of children, their families, within their communities, and with policies. Next slide. Policies, state, federal, local, should promote continuity of care, ease of enrollment, expanded implementation of evidence-based programs we've heard a lot about today, particularly those that are designed for families facing multiple adversities. It's also important to recognize that the workforce, both early childhood and child welfare, are critical infrastructure components of a secondary approach, and they must be adequately supported and trained to provide services for families that fall in this category. Next slide. Strengthening families, front porch, and the pyramid model are 3 existing frameworks to create cross-sector best practices. High-stress communities that promote protective factors, service coordination, and social-emotional competence will successfully reduce child maltreatment. Families will thrive in communities that create integrated supports. Availability and accessibility to secondary prevention services are limited, and we need more of them. We've heard this multiple times. Thank you, Sheena, for your very enlightening comments today, and to our other presenters who have talked about this need. Families who have experienced multiple adversities and who may have screened out of a referral to child welfare are often families who are on the bubble of either success or disintegration. We need more culturally relevant services for families, especially to provide treatment for substance use disorders and parenting education. And I think after hearing Sheena's remarks earlier, peer support stood out to me so strongly as a more needed service for our families. Next slide. Finally, Oklahoma's early childhood, we're a little bit ahead, go back, sorry, yeah, right there. Finally, Oklahoma's early childhood services are considered primary prevention, have opportunities to support early learning and development for children at risk for involvement in the child welfare system. Center-based programs provide much needed respite for families as they stabilize, who haven't experienced a deeper appreciation for teachers as children have been home because they're not able to attend center-based programs. We should strengthen family engagement also within the early childhood programs to increase parents' understanding of developmental expectations. A lack thereof is a strong predictor of child maltreatment. Next slide. As we strive to create an aligned system to support child and family well-being, we must ensure that the metaphorical life raft or services that we are offering is within reach of those in need, and that they trust the source from which it comes. Families told us all across the state that they are fearful of being judged as a poor parent if they ask for help, and are particularly distrustful of government services. We must be cautious also not to overstress an already stressed parent by throwing them too many life rafts and expecting them to hang on to all of them. Next slide. Lastly, but most importantly, a system that supports family and child well-being must be fully accessible without barriers driven by race, ethnic, and class discrimination. Within services for all and those that are targeted to eligible populations, ensuring positive outcomes are within reach requires tailoring supports based on needs. Achieving equity in policy and within well-integrated communities for families and children is beyond optimal, it is imperative. Next slide. From all of us at OPSR, thank you for spending your morning with us, and we look forward to continued collaboration. And so now I'd like to turn the stage over to Dr. Deb Shropshire, who will close out our panel with her perspective in keeping families together. Thank you.
Well, can you guys hear me okay? Good, okay, all right. Well, it's an honor to be with you today, and I'll tell you, I mean, first of all, thanks for joining. There's like 100 people on this line, and I was looking through the faces and the list of who was on the line, and I just thought, I don't know that there could be a more sort of powerhouse problem-solving group than the group that we have on this call together. So thank you for joining and spending your morning working on this. Second of all, this has been organized with a specific story arc. So thank you to the organizers, but this has been organized with a specific story arc that you've been hearing. And that is sort of vision, both from Justin Brown and also from Sheena, of like what this actually looks like from 30,000 feet, but also from an individual perspective to serve families as a state in a way that strengthens families. And then from this panel, you've been hearing the information about the impact of the sort of crossroads between early childhood and child welfare, and how that influences outcomes in a negative way, but the opportunity we have to influence it in a different way going forward. And also the language around around trauma and adversity, but also hope and resilience. And then you've now heard folks talking through primary and secondary prevention. And so I want to close out the panel just talking a little bit about the sort of child welfare's place in this, in a sense, a prevention continuum. And we sort of get stuck in the tertiary space. I'm a physician, I'm a pediatrician. I wasn't going to be a pediatrician. I don't actually like kids very much. I like, at least not like from a, you know, like I'm not going to hold your baby and stuff like that. Just wasn't quite wired that way. But I do, I did fall in love when I was in medical school, and I thought I wanted to be an ER doctor. I fell in love with kids who were in the foster care system and with their parents and all the adversity and challenges around families that find themselves running into child welfare. And at the same time, my passion in medicine was, you know, the ER and the don't come see me until you're, you know, you broke your leg or you're bleeding from somewhere. But I'll tell you, there's only so many times you can see that the train kind of hit the wall and you clean up the pieces, that at some point you don't start saying, why don't we stop the train further ahead of the tracks before it runs into the wall? And that's true in the emergency medicine space, and it's true in this space as well. How many children and families will encounter the child welfare system and the foster care system unnecessarily before we figure out how to move up the track and figure out how to really strengthen families early on. I appreciated the speakers who were talking, Beth, and you were talking about strengthening families. Several speakers have mentioned that, because I will tell you that we're framing the way we even think about child welfare, which most of you would think of as, you know, it is the end, sort of the tertiary piece of this discussion, but we're starting to frame our language for how we serve families through that same lens of strengthening families. Because even if something has already happened that has brought you to our attention, and we are now in that tertiary space, it should be our mission to figure out how to strengthen your family so that as a child is able to move back home, or if we're able to preserve that family situation without the use of foster care, that that family is left in better shape than when we found them. That every single individual we encounter, child and family we encounter, comes out on the other side of this experience a little bit better. And so we have written that actually into our True North goals, which Justin Brown mentioned, the idea of strengthening families. And for child welfare specifically, we said, hey, we want to, one of our 3 key goals is we want to equip and empower families to provide a safe home for their children. And so that is the space that we're operating in. Now, I didn't make slides for you. I'm just going to talk to you for a couple more minutes. I want to talk to you a little bit about Family First. I didn't make slides on purpose because I thought, you know, I don't know exactly what everybody else is going to say, and I'm glad I didn't, because they have given you some incredible visuals and some incredible information this morning. And so I just want to kind of wrap us up a little bit in this panel conversation by talking through Family First specifically. There's been lots of conversations around the Family First Prevention Services Act, and a lot of information out in the public, nationally, locally, et cetera, around this. And I think this legislation, it's a piece of legislation that was passed federally a 3 years ago, and this legislation is an incredibly important stake in the ground from a federal perspective, and it gives an opportunity for states to kind of imitate that by putting a stake in the ground and saying, rather than just waiting for families to enter foster care, we're going to actually try to figure out how to move dollars and strategies upstream. That being said, the Family First Act actually has a number of different parts, and it is really primarily a financing bill as it relates to child welfare. So Family First is not talking about preventing child abuse in the same way that Beth or Deborah are actually talking about. It's not saying, hey, this bill is about primary prevention. The bill is actually, the act is actually directing child welfare to try to figure out how to prevent children from entering foster care. So just have in your mind, when you hear about a Family First Prevention Services Act, that prevention word is really talking about the prevention of children entering foster care. However, the spirit, clearly the spirit of our federal leadership, and that I would say within our state that we have around this act, is how can we, child welfare, partner with organizations like OPSR, with you, to be moving dollars and work and attention and practice, child welfare practice, upstream as much as possible, even though we recognize that much of our work is the tertiary space. In the field of medicine, you would not you would not want to have a healthcare system that doesn't have an ER. But on the other hand, to the best of your ability, if you were operating a healthcare system, you would want that system to have the smallest possible ER, and most of those dollars to be in efforts to be moving upstream so that people didn't wind up actually needing the ER. And that's actually where we should be moving, and I believe where we are moving as a state. So a little bit about Family First Prevention Services Act. First of all, states have to consider a lot of different factors when they are determining how they are as a state going to implement this. Federal policy typically gives guidance, it gives sort of guardrails for states, but states actually determine how they're going to write their plan, how they're going to carry out that federal guidance within the confines of their own state. So we have to think about things like, what do we have currently around child maltreatment prevention strategies? What evidence-based practices do we already have? There's a great deal of interest in the Family First Act around seeing evidence-based, evidence-informed practices be utilized to serve families, as opposed to sort of just creating programs that we think will work. We want to really, really take advantage of social science research during this time. And then what's our approach to certain other aspects of child welfare? And so the bill doesn't just include information about or recommendations around prevention of foster care. It also actually instructs us to do some things differently while children are in foster care, particularly around the use of kinship foster homes and things like the use of congregate care or group care. So all of those things have to be taken into account for a state to write its Family First Prevention Services Plan. There are some states in the country that have actually already written a plan, defined what population they will serve and how they're going to adjust their funding and things like that to meet that plan. Many of the states that have already deployed had certain elements in place, particularly around, say, congregate care, things like that, that made it advantageous to them to go ahead and deploy their plan earlier. Other states, there's kind of a window of when you actually can adopt your Family First Services Plan. Our state elected to delay, and so we are writing our plan right now, which is part of the reason that I'm excited to be on this call with you all, because some of you have already been involved with conversations with me around the Family First Plan, and others of you, I think, will be continuing to engage around Family First over the next year or so as we write and deploy our plan in the fall of next year. The timing is really for us based on a couple of things. One is based on where it financially makes sense for our state in terms of work we're doing in the congregate care space as well as the prevention space. It was also based on the fact that we actually have a pretty significant amount of success in prevention already with child welfare, and that success has looked like a couple of different things. We have several successful programs we're already involved in funding that serve a lot of families. In fact, if you're a family that encounters child welfare and has an investigation, and then the result of that investigation is that we substantiate child abuse and we say, you need some additional engagement with us, whether that could be foster care, could be a prevention case where we're serving you in your home through services, but we're staying involved in the case. Almost half of all families who move beyond that substantiated investigation, almost half of those are currently being served in a prevention case. Most people don't think about that when they think about child welfare. They think about foster care, but actually we're serving almost as many families through prevention services as we are foster care. Now, that prevention service in Oklahoma is pretty strong already. It looks like things like the use of the Safe Care model, which has recently been approved as having the appropriate evidence to be part of a Family First Plan. We have also utilized a particular kind of experimental, if you want to call it that, a program that was designed several years ago and tested that did utilize Safe Care, but also some other supports called Intensive Safety Services. And that program has also been very successful. We have an additional program in our state, Intercept, which is operated by Youth Villages, that has also recently hit the clearinghouse of evidence-based approved kind of programs for Family First. So we already have actually some pretty strong programs in that kind of tertiary prevention space that have evidence around them that we're funding already and will continue to fund throughout this period of time while we're designing and getting ready to deploy our Family First Plan. So the fact that we've already been sort of funding in that space and moving families into that space, I think gives Oklahoma a real heads up, a real head start on creating a strong Family First Plan and continuing to then sort of say, what are the other elements we need? If we were a state that had almost no prevention effort around child welfare, we'd be starting from scratch, but we aren't starting from scratch. We have the ability to be able to sit, look at our data, and kind of say, as a state, what are the pieces that may be missing? I heard folks talking about substance abuse treatment, and Sheena was talking about that as well. I think there's some gaps or some spaces in there that child welfare may be able to do some really effective partnering with other organizations to try to fill some of those gaps. So that's the direction that we're going with the Family First Act. So if you have been interested in where the state is, we're currently in the process of continuing to kind of put together the data and thinking about the current programs that are already in our state, as well as taking a look at what other programs are out there that we might say they would benefit our state to bring them and serve a particular population. But that's the space that we're in, and over the next year, we'll be looking forward to continuing to partner with you around the creation of that plan. Family First, as was mentioned, the Family First Prevention Services Act is only one small piece of the prevention continuum. I'm very interested in how do we actually move child welfare upstream, and we have many families that we hear about or we even engage that don't have a substantiation of child abuse and neglect. Either those families that we go out that Justin mentioned that you sort of say this isn't child abuse, but boy, this family really needs help, or even the calls that come into our hotline, some 40 or 50,000 of which we actually from a phone call screen out and do not become involved with. Those are families that are prime opportunities for us to connect with services so that we don't wind up in the spot where tertiary prevention is the only opportunity for us. And we're very eager to continue working hard to try to actually move resources and collaboration and effort of our staff and of the child welfare system upstream to be able to serve more into that secondary and primary prevention space. So that's kind of the update on Family First, and we'll be happy as a panel to field some of your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Shropshire, and to all of our panelists. To transition to questions, I just want to remind everybody you can chat your questions as you have them. We've gotten a few, and we have a few minutes left for questions. So we're going to turn to that now. I want to remind everybody that Sheena has returned to the panel if you have a question for her, but also let you know that unfortunately Beth Martin had to leave the meeting, so she's not available for questions. The other thing we think we know about the Zoom platform is if those of you who still have your video showing, if you're able to stop your video, we think what that will do is bring all of our panelists to the main screen for everybody. And that way we can kind of focus in on this last few minutes with our panelists answering questions. So with that, I'm going to pose the first question. I'm actually going to pose it to, I really, Sheena, would like your answer first, and then would invite any of the other panelists to weigh in. But one of the questions that we got, Sheena, is that how do we link and strengthen early childhood efforts and upstream, helping families upstream without their feeling a risk of being labeled as child welfare families? Does that make sense, that fear of being labeled being a barrier to accessing services?
It does make sense. And to me, just to be able to alleviate that stigma with child welfare is going to be a drawn out process. And it's just like what Secretary Brown said about, reintroducing what, who DHS is and what we stand for. And so I don't think I have just like a direct answer of like, this is exactly what we need to do. It's just, like I said, a long drawn out process of reducing that stigma that this is not, you're a bad parent. This is, you need some help and we're here to help you.
That's very helpful. Do any of the other panelists want to say something about that?
Yeah, this is Deb with Child Welfare. I would say, so we, in January, our communications department came and said, we'd like to do a Child Abuse Prevention Month campaign. And we'd like to, figure out like what the language should be. And immediately, Child Abuse Prevention Month, as you all know, is in April. Immediately, my mind went to the Strengthening Families Framework because I don't think people want us to show up on their porch, any of us, to show up on their porch and say, we're here to prevent for you from abusing your child. If someone showed up on my porch and said that, I'd be like, get out. And so we wanted to use the language that was presented in the Strengthening Families framework to say everybody needs the same ingredients to have a strong family. We all need it. And I don't care where you live. I don't care what your socioeconomic situation is. I don't care what your background is. We all need the same ingredients. The difference between us is who has what ingredients. And as systems, how do we help people connect with the ingredients they need? And so we took that approach. I think a piece of that destigmatizing piece has to be moving away from child welfare and child abuse prevention to language around all families need certain things, and what can we do to help you identify what your family needs, and what is it you would like us to do to help you with meeting that. So I think that language is going to be a shared language around that, not just in one space, the health department space, but not the child welfare space, or the early childhood space, but not the older kid space, whatever. I think it's all our systems coming together and saying, we're going to stand on the idea that we all need certain things, and here's the language for it. I think that will help us get down the road.
Great. If I could, yeah, go ahead, Annette.
No, go ahead.
Well, just real quickly, what I'd like to build on that is that we, in a lot of the research we did over the past year, learned a lot about who trusted messengers are. And so having that common language and then ensuring that we're sharing the messages through the right people really rang through for us with a lot of the work that we did. So Annette, you want to build on that?
I do, and that was the point I was going to make. And I would say that one of the best trusted messengers we have is someone just like Sheena, right? So if Miss Grayson tells other folks, I mean, she's like the best spokesperson you have. And so to me, to build an army of folks that have experienced in positive ways all kinds of services, not just child welfare, but any kind of support that can band together to say, you know, this is good. You want to be a part of this club. This is okay. This is a safe spot. This is a supportive place. I think that's the best thing you can do. And I loved what you said, Dr. Shropshire, about the message has to be carried by all of us in all agencies across all the spectrum, because it normalizes and it really makes us all recognize that we're in it together. And I love that. I think we've got great examples of the messenger and the message today. And it's not a lot of us agency people, let me say that, sadly. I love my job, but we're not the best spokespeople.
Okay, I'm looking at the time. I want to pose one more question that's come in and ask, it would be great if each of you responded, but I'll just ask that each of you who has a response will respond, and that will take us probably about 5 minutes, and then we'll turn it to Dr. Shropshire and Deborah to close us out, and then the morning session will be done. But the question is this, or the request is this: highlight one thing that you would want to prioritize as a key step Oklahoma must take to better link early childhood systems and child welfare prevention. So one thing to better link early childhood systems and child welfare prevention.
I'll start that.
Okay.
Training, cross-sector training. Everybody, you know, just as we want consistent messages that families hear, I think the more our providers are trained with a similar frame around the unique developmental needs of young kids and the importance of them accessing a variety of resources in the early years and supporting their families.
Right.
Erin?
I would say really building that front porch model that wherever a family needs, there's a door they walk up to, it's welcoming, and there are people inside that can help direct that family to what they need according, you know, services matched exactly to their need in a supportive and holistic way.
Right, thanks. Others have a response? Annette?
I'd love to follow up on that, because I love the front porch answer, and I'd like to even expound on that and say automatic referrals to something like front porch, so that if a family walks in through child welfare, that they get referrals automatically for things that are more preventative in nature, that are broader than maybe what we've typically done. I think that's where we're going, and that's what's been happening. But to think about childcare and other services that families outside child welfare use all the time, but to not just think about crisis referrals, but truly just general supportive services as an automatic.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other responses to that?
I'm always going to have a weigh in on something like that. I think utilizing technology to figure out how to equip people to do that. And I'm thinking about my staff in this case. There's so many, I heard y'all saying, like somebody could kind of have a one-stop shop, and you walk in and someone knows what to do for you and how to connect you with the services that might be the right ones. But the truth of the matter is, it's overwhelming to our staff to keep up with all of the different things that families may need and how to actually connect families. And so I think leveraging technology in not only the space that helps us help families find what can serve them, but also, I mean, we're in a new world. We got to think about how we leverage technology even around the way we communicate with families and the way we connect to services. And so I don't know exactly what Be a Neighbor what the potential is for something like Be a Neighbor, but that is an effort by the Department of Human Services to try to bring services together in a kind of a space that we could imagine deploying. We imagine connecting, for example, our hotline workers to that kind of a technology tool, to the right kind of training, as was mentioned, so that we could potentially equip community members who are calling with concerns about somebody, and we could equip them with language and resources to connect a family to that wouldn't otherwise necessarily have a child welfare involvement. And so trying to think about some of that linkage that could be potentially increased through technology, given the season that we're in, is I think going to be important as well.
Thank you. And then we do need to wrap up, but Sheena, if you'd like to have the last word, just want to welcome you to either weigh in on that question, or if you have any one last message for folks.
Again, I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity to be able to share my story and to give, my thoughts on prevention. But the question that was stated, I definitely agree with Dr. Shropshire in regards to mindful language, and using that strength-based language is going to be what, encourages a parent to move forward and to seek services and to participate in services. And so just making sure that that's in all of our systems, just like she said, well-rounded, that's definitely the key. But again, thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to share my screen now just to put up our last couple of slides and turn it over to Dr. Shropshire and Deborah Anderson to talk about next steps and to close us out in our last 5 minutes.
Dr. Shropshire, I wanted to go first because I want to give you the last word. But I had two things for that question, and so I want to, on the closing remarks from Sheena, I want to say also, I think that we're vested in thinking about how we lift up family voice into our processes and better have families be part of the design and development of how we best meet the needs of families across services. So that's a next step that we are committed in ensuring that we do. We also have a number of work groups. We're working on integrated data. We're thinking about how to support professionals, how to better engage families. We have lots of opportunities, I think, to continue to meet, collaborate, and work together. So OPSR, that's our job, is to bring you all together. We're not the experts, but we're thankful for those of you in the room that are. And so again, I'll just close with thank you for that. And let's turn it over to Dr. Shropshire for closing remarks.
Yeah, so again, I just would reiterate, thank you so much for those of you, the 100 of you or so that took your morning to spend this time with us. I think it's not the beginning of this conversation. We're in the middle somewhere, but we continue to need engagement from those of you who are on this call. And so I know we will be continuing to look for opportunities to bring folks together to help us with the planning around Family First, and also trying to make sure that we, in a sense, take advantage of the opportunity of Family First to mesh with some of the other activities and efforts that are going on. I would love to see, I imagine, I think child welfare being, and really the Department of Human Services, in a sense, being much more strategic as we go forward in this prevention space of what are the things that we could potentially shovel sort of nickels and dimes to, and funding toward, and collaboration toward, and practice toward, that backs us in again into the prevention space. So all of that to say, over the next year, a lot of work around Family First. We will be engaging many of the people who are on this call for kind of, hey, can you come back together with us and help us work through the specific steps as we design the Family First plan. This will not be the last opportunity to have this conversation by any stretch. And so I think the other thing I would just leave you with is, again, this idea of shared language, shared kind of vision around how do we sort of move upstream together. And I think a lot of that is already happening, and let's just keep going until we're done. And we'll know we're done when there's a lot more people like Sheena who have that story. I could listen to that lady all day. I mean, I was just like, none of the rest of us even need to talk. Let's just stop talking and let Sheena talk, because she is telling us what we need to do for families. And wouldn't it be awesome if we had hundreds and thousands of Sheenas with a story that starts earlier, that doesn't have to go through maybe so much tragedy that she relayed, but actually listens to her wisdom and can be served earlier. And that's when we'll know we're done, is when we can do that. So anyway, thanks to Sheena, thanks to the other panelists, and those of you who are who organized this, and then those of you who joined us. And please continue looking for opportunities for us to engage.
Thank you. And just as we close, reminding everybody that all of the materials and the recording, the materials are already up on the OPSR website. You received that link, and the recording will be up by next Friday, May 29th. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you again for joining us.